Welcome to MTMG's IT Roundtable, where we bring the power of human connections to the tech world. Our experts become part of your team, so whatever tech problem is keeping you up at night, we can help you solve it.
Joining us today is Joel Evans. He is the emerging tech leader for MTMG. Known him for years. We'll get into all of these great things, but just wanted to get him on here to talk about some of the things that he's seeing today and where he's come from and where he thinks things are going. So thank you for joining us, Joel. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Paul. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. So Joel, you've had a fascinating career spanning 30 years or so. Could you share some key moments that defined your journey across different industries?
Sure. Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is that I always had a passion for technology and a love for gadgets. I'm known as the tech guy who speaks human. And since I've always gravitated towards gadgets, I'm very fortunate in that I've been able to make my living off of my passion. There's like a shiny new object I'm to go to, and usually in my personal circles, but for my professional circles now. So I was very early on with the web. I was working for a software company at the time, thought that the web was actually going to mean something. So built a website. Same thing works mobile. I was doing stuff on mobile when people in the US were just making phone calls. I was building games and letting you wager for GTES. So really, what defines me is that I take a look and say, okay, cool, shiny new objects, shiny gadget, but is this thing just fly by, or is this going to be like a transformational cool thing?
Joel, you mentioned a tech leader who speaks human. Can you expand on that and just explain how your approach helps you bridge the gap between the technology and business needs that are in your projects?
Sure, absolutely. So what I used to tell people is, and I actually had a stint where I was running a recruiting division for a global recruiting firm once upon a time. And I used to always say, I can do the majority of what I place. So what I always tell people, including technology people, is let's leave the technology out of this. Let's look at the challenge that's in front of us. Let's come up with what we think is our end game. And there's always going to be the new, as I mentioned before, shiny object. There's always new technology that's going to get us there. But it's really more about taking a step back. What is the business problem to solve? And then breaking it down that way and then applying the technology. So that's what I mean by a tech guy that speaks human. I can talk to a business person, understand what their challenges are, what their goals are. As a matter of fact, I start most of those conversations with what are your goals, for 2024 and beyond. And then usually almost immediately it'll be like, what have you done with the Vision Pro? Or what are you doing with eyes? It's just, everyone's talking about it, but what are you really doing with it? So I think that's a key. I don't read with the technology as much as I could, but I pride myself on understanding what that technology is actually going to mean to business.
I think that's fascinating. And that it is something that we hear all the time, that you can't just use technology for its own sake. Just using AI is not a solution in and of itself. You have to define what is the solution you need, what is the pain you're trying to solve, and then find the right tool to use. So I think that's exactly right. But I know in the past, you've mentioned your methodology of discover, assess, POC. Could you walk us through how this apply in real world scenarios?
Absolutely. So in my experience, and I've got 30 plus years of it at this point, working both independently and for very large companies, even publicly traded companies, I'd always find that everybody has the best intentions. They want to get the project going, but it stalls. And it usually stalls right out of the gate. And what I found is it's stalling out of the gate because the stakeholder is trying to determine what information should be shared to make the project successful. And I'm like, okay, just throw it all at me. I equate it to turning on a fire hose. Like, just throw it all at me. That's discover. Just throw it all at me. I'll tell you whether or not we need it. Don't worry about it. Just give me access to it. And then assess is really a matter of now combing through all the information that's been gathered. But I don't believe in analysis paralysis. I've been on a number of engagements where we sit there and do strategy for strategy's sake. I'm not a fan of it. So that's where I drive towards the POC, or proof of concept. And the idea there is, and I've actually taught big corporations, this one is, it doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to work. And that's the purpose of the POC. Let's get the kinks out now before we're spending all that money. So I've done very early on when Alexa was first, coming to be, we were putting Alexa in hotel rooms for Intercontinental Hotel Group. And I bring up that example because we were trying to show how you could have two different Alexas in two different rooms, turning on, two different lights. I actually have a video where it looks like we literally have a lamp with no shades, or two lamps with no shades and two Alexas, and they've got like Post-it notes on them, demonstrating one's one room, one's another room. And you know what? Everyone like cheered and was so excited that we got it to work. And it was the ugliest thing you've ever seen, but it worked. And that was key. So I'm always all about drive towards the POC, and then also, another big piece is get to rinse and repeat if you can. A lot of the big projects that I've done, we usually try to break it down so we can get it right the first time. Well, not necessarily the first time, but once we get it right, then we can do a rinse and repeat in a wave-based approach. So that's why I'm all about discover, assess, POC. And then that works everywhere from even just going to a pilot to a full-blown implementation.
So you mentioned Alexa, you mentioned a couple other emerging technologies that you get involved in. And as you well know, the emerging technologies are always emerging in the tech world, right? It never stops. I'd be interested to hear how to stay ahead of that curve and how you decide which innovations are worth pursuing for a business problem.
I absolutely love that question because I get asked it all the time. I'm always learning. And as I mentioned, I have a passion for it. So a case in point is I was just asked to advise on something, and it's a migration of a content management system. I've got a lot of experience with WordPress and a bunch of others. And someone would say WordPress is antiquated, right? So then they're saying, okay, there's the headless CMS, and there's all these different acronyms for it, just like we used to have Rapsta, all these other things. So it's my job to then go, all right, is this just something that someone threw out there because they want to sound intelligent, or are we actually going to see something transformational here? And the idea is really to then take a look and say, okay, what's a practical application of this, right? Because we've all seen it. There was, in the early days of mobile, there was low code or no code solutions. They weren't the best things out there, but you didn't have to be a developer to get a mobile app up and running. We're seeing the same thing now, powered by AI, where you've got low code and no code. And people are saying, okay, does this mean we're not going to need developers anymore? So it's my job to take that step back and say, okay, is this, how can this be an enabler, or is this going to be transformational, or is this just a fly-by-night? I think the perfect example, as much as I need to use this one, is virtual reality. Been around a long time. Everybody's, metaverse, we're not going to be in person anymore. We don't need to be. It's perfect. Collaborate, communicate, no need. I just got my headset on and I can play and I can be there. And there are companies like Accenture that have been doing it for years and years, where we'll have these virtual meetings. But what's the real practical application for VR? Is it a shiny new fun thing that we can use in business, or is it actually going to really make a difference for us? And early on, I wrote a bunch about the Apple Vision Pro. I bought one. I was one of the first to get my hands on it. And I really put it through its paces and tried to justify keeping it. And in the end, it really felt like it was like a developer device, where they were just trying to throw as much as they could into it to get the developers thinking through what this really could be in the future. But that's an example of, okay, we got to stay ahead of it. Is it going to mean something to business? Is this going to be transformational, or are we just playing around again?
I think we see that time and again in industry, that whether it's 5G was built as the most incredible thing for business, and it's had exceptionally slow uptake because there is still no killer app for it. There's still not that compelling use case that just is impossible another way. So we see it across all sorts of different industries. But you've mentioned a number of different projects you've worked on, whether it was the Alexa in the universities, and I know you mentioned that you helped launch mobile platforms for the lottery. But which of those projects are you most proud of? And what challenges did you overcome to make it successful?
Sure. Actually, if I could go back to your 5G one first, because you hit one of my favorite subjects, which is wireless and mobility. When LTE was first coming out, I was all excited about it. I thought that we were now going to see the ability for us to pay 1 month fee and pretty much connect everything to it. So Joel Evans pays monthly, and every single thing that's wireless that Joel Evans ever wants to touch, very similar to what we do with Wi-Fi in our home, right? Like then my device is rocking and rolling. I really thought that we were going to see that happen with LTE. That really could have been the true promise of it. But companies were like, oh, I think I could hit them for multiple Gs a month if I do this. And they did it with the Apple Watch, right? That was an example when the Apple Watch came out. I think it was Verizon might have been the first one that said, oh, for an extra $10 a month. Well, but it's interesting because the technology has the ability to enable us, or maybe corporations are like, oh, well, if it can enable, maybe you're willing to pay for the enabler, right? What is it? Is it BMW? Was it BMW that was charging for you to turn on the power of your heated seats or something? And then it didn't go over well, so they released that one. It was one of those car makers. I think it might have been BMW. Normally, I'd pop it up to Google or verify myself. Well, we'll be friendly on this podcast. There you go. I'll throw random things out. I think for me, there's been so many that have been transformational that I'm really proud of. I think I started Geek.com as a passion project in the 90s because it was something that I wanted to see on the web. There weren't really reviews of hardware and software or information on the latest news. I paired up with a bunch of guys that I had been working with at the time. And little by little, we pared down to a core group that sort of stayed the course. But I was really proud of that because it went from me being excited about 100 visitors coming to the site to thousands of visitors to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. And I was like, wow, built this and look at what it did. So it was cool to see what I wanted to see. I wasn't the only one who wanted to see it out there, which is really cool. And then I guess I'd move next to taking the lottery mobile because in the US, it wasn't really a thing. And I had meetings with all the carriers in the US and was trying to convince them technologically how this was possible and could be legal. Whereas overseas, they were like, of course we're doing things from our mobile phone and blah, blah, blah. So it was a piece of education that went along with the implementation and the transformation. And it's hard to pinpoint, from a non-tech side, I guess I'm most proud of my two boys, right? I have to say that. My family, so proud, must it.
There's nothing wrong with that, but
I just couldn't resist.
I was there when you were trying to get, the company at the time was named G-Tech. It's now been purchased by someone else, but it's still in the lottery place. But that was an incredibly interesting time because you had a lot of challenges you needed to overcome. One of them was, how do you apply the rules of each state? Because each state had its own gambling rules of what was allowed, what wasn't allowed, and how do you prove that the person placing that bet or making that action, where they were standing? Because this was long before GPS was nearly as robust as it is today. But what other challenges did you face with that?
And that's a really interesting one, right? Because and that's an example of discover us as POC, because I built cool stuff, fast-tracked a lot of partnerships with some. Think back to a world where people weren't really doing a lot of stuff on their mobile phones. It happened very quickly. We were making calls. Then we had J2ME phones, which gave us the ability to have very basic gaming and some of the other things. And very quickly, I fast-tracked some partnerships with some major mobile game developers, as well as guys that were really ahead of their time with Pocket PC and Windows Mobile. They were showing off some proof of concept just to get people to get their mind around it. And the idea there was, you like this game, right? This game we're playing, this blackjack game or this slot game. With the power of G-Tech, we can just hook this up and make this a real pop, right? So that was a really interesting, fun experience there. And that was getting people's mind to embrace the fact that they could do that with mobile. Then on the technology front, like you were saying, I had to try and figure out how to originate and terminate and guarantee that you're originating and terminating the transaction at the same place. And people, again, weren't really trusting mobile. GPS was a thing, but people won't remember this, but even like Sprint was ahead of their time, had cameras on their phones and people weren't trusting the cameras. They weren't trusting to share their location. It was a really, strange time. So I had to write a bunch of papers on triangulating your signal, your positioning from cell phone towers, because you were going to do it that way. So that was one piece from a technology challenge. Then you had the political challenge. Now you had to get someone to actually stick their nose out and go, I want this. And then you had just the nature of the business, which is then it has to go to RFP, then it has to go through the cycles. So even if and I had some really cool stuff, even if we had some really cool technology to show off, and we even had a lottery director who's, I love this thing, it still didn't mean that they were going to be able to turn a switch. It's not like a traditional business where it goes, I love this. I love Teams Phone. I want to migrate to Teams Phone. It doesn't work that way. I really love this mobile lottery thing. Let me see if politically I can put my butt on the line and keep this a reality.
Very complex.
And I'll add that the really cool thing about when I was working here at GTech is I was around and working with some of the smartest guys I've ever met in my life. So I could throw something on the wall to see if it would stick and try and shut my technology brain off and go, it would be really cool if we could do this. And next thing, one of the guys would be like, oh, come with me. We did a whiteboard and he'd show me like where all of my obstacles were and why, and how they'd been trying it for 20 years. And
yeah, amazing.
It was a fun time.
So you
sounds it.
You did another project, which was a return to office product that you delivered to MBTA. What were the key factors there that contributed to its success?
The key factors there were, first off, communication and transparency. So we won the RFP. Our stakeholder was the CIO, and so the deputy CIO. And we were, at the time, augmenting their team. If you think back, I think everybody's technology groups are always crazy busy. But if you think back, this was the height of the pandemic, and they didn't even know what was going to happen next, or we needed to get people back to the office safely. So we augmented their team, but more importantly, we ran separate from their team in parallel and letting them be as involved as they wanted to be, bringing them up to speed. And this is a lesson I learned from doing the Northeastern deployments and then Telem deployments, was like, how well can we work independently and then sync back and make sure the stakeholders feel like they're as involved as they want to be. But the key to the MBTA one was understanding very early on the way they do business, understanding the challenges that were in front of us. And then on the side, we fast-tracked a partnership with a company called Envoy that basically makes a virtual representation of your office space. And the key there was understanding what the stakeholders wanted. They knew we needed to deploy in a very short amount of time. We knew we couldn't have any hiccups in the deployment. So we stood up our own staging environment. We showed them what all that was going to look like. We worked very closely with Envoy, very closely with the folks at the MBTA, and made sure that we were all moving forward at the right pace at the right time. Because at any moment, we had a construction delay, we had a spike in COVID activity, we had all these things that kept throwing wrenches, but we knew what our end game was, and we knew how to morph it. And I think going back to what we said at the beginning of the podcast, it was also all about the methodology. We were really driving towards that proof of concept. The proof of concept kept evolving, I guess. So we had phase 1 POC, then we had phase 2 POC because some restrictions suddenly came about. Phase 3 because one of the floors didn't open the way it was supposed to. But I think overall, the key to the success is really understanding the problem, understanding the appropriate deadlines, what the stakeholders wanted, what the stakeholders needed, and then making sure it was really part of the entire engagement all the way through. And I'll give a special shout out also to my partner in crime in the engagement is Renee Little, an absolutely amazing engagement manager. I worked with her independently at Northeastern. And then after Northeastern, we worked together at Telem and then MBTA and a number of other engagements. And she handles all the stuff that I can manage a project, but it's not what I do. And she can just take every ball that gets thrown in the air and somehow put it into the right timeline. And we, in the course of one project, we probably spin up plus swim lanes that go in parallel to ensure success. And that's key to it all.
I think I've gotten to know Renee a little bit now, having worked with her on a project, and she's an exceptionally talented person, being able to manage an incredible amount of details and personalities and keep things moving. She is a tremendous person. We're actually looking forward to having her and Blackjack Productions on a future podcast, but she is just outstanding.
Yeah,
so I think
her forte is literally like we had. A perfect example is for Northeastern. I originally was hired to put together a unified communication strategy, was evaluating what all the conference rooms were set up with, this, that, and the other, uncovered a Teams phone migration pilot that had been going on and had stalled, and then was working with a project manager. And then as I inherited, I was asked to then come on board and lead the entire transformational initiative. It became clear to me that it was going to be very big. So I needed someone different than the people that were being put in front of me. So I asked for someone. I said, I really need someone who can handle multiple projects, basically be an engagement lead, but not feel like they're too high up that they can't get down and dirty and be a project manager as well. And they introduced me to Renee, who they found independently. And again, the beauty of it was we started with one project, which was the Teams phone migration. Then it was like a go big or go home scenario. We ended up spinning up and writing up a business case for rolling out Surface hubs across campus. But at any moment, there was yet another wrench. We had to do a migration from Horizon. You know this well, that anytime you involve any of the carriers, you never really know what's going to come next. So there were so many different balls in the air. And it was great to know that any ball that got thrown her way was suddenly going to be, I'll call it digested and appropriately placed.
Yeah. And I just thinking back to something we were talking about before the podcast started, just surrounding yourself with people that are better than you at things. And I think you just hit it on the head. Everybody has their talents. Everybody has their strengths and their weaknesses. But what makes truly a team successful is having the people that all have their best strengths aligned on the same purpose. And I think you've done that great with Renee. Working with Renee and Rodney was fantastic. And I see that with my team. I am exceptionally lucky to have the folks around this MTMG as I do with Joe and with you and with Ken and with Dan. And there's so many people that have raised their hand, come on to help. And I'm just very lucky every day. So, but I don't want to make this about me.
Well, but I think, back to your point when you were asking me about what makes a project successful. Unfortunately, I seem to specialize in impossible deadlines. But what I do, and this is part of the speaks human part of being a tech, is I will assess the strengths of everybody who's involved in the project or even the outliers, because I don't know everything, right? So a case point will be if someone said, hey, Joel, I really need you to work on this enterprise deployment. I've done enterprise deployments before. If they wanted me to then come in and assess the architecture, make sure we're maximizing the use of AWS. I know enough, but I know guys who live and breathe AWS daily, especially on our team too. And I would just come back in and go, okay, guys, here's my situation. Maybe we need to spin up another parallel stream here and just do a technology assessment, an architecture assessment, whether it's paid for by the client or not. If it makes the project more successful, then that's what we'll do. So I don't pretend to know everything. I like to know a lot. I like to know a little about everything and a lot about some things, but I have no problem bringing in experts that specialize in other areas as needed.
I agree. So just thinking about, you've talked about the tech guy that speaks human. It sounds like you've had a lot of great projects come to completion. How do you ensure that everyone's on the same page and that you do get to that completion the way it can be done?
Awesome question. So I think I've highlighted that we're all about making sure that we're communicating the whole way through, that we're ready for the arcs, even though you really can't be ready for the arcs. But if you do rules in lockstep with your stakeholders, then we are working towards ensuring success there. A big piece and a lot of what gets missed and what I think is a big differentiator, like system integrators will integrate and they'll make sure the system's up and running and they go, everything's great, it's wonderful, it's magical. And then people don't use it or they struggle with it. Where I'm really all about, I keep saying but I am all about ensuring success by ensuring adoption. And what I mean by that is, case in point, we did it for the Teams phone migrations. We did it for returning the MBTA back to work. We took a look at the traditional help desk, even the help desk videos, the how-tos, and we made it our own. The first thing I do is I put the client's logo on anything we create, because then they feel a sense of ownership. And more importantly, their people feel like this is coming from internal. It's not an external vendor. And this has been blessed. We should, adhere to it. But the other thing is a lot of times the help articles or even the training that come from the companies that deployed it, they're generic, obviously, because they have to be, but they go into a lot more detail than is needed. I like to break things out into like snackable little bites, snackable content. If you want to you need to know how to make a phone call in Teams phone. It could be a 30-second blip. It doesn't have to be a 2-minute, how to. Same thing with like little quick start guides. So I think that's a really big piece of it. And a big piece of that is training the trader. So we're never afraid to go, do you have people internally who do X, Y, and Z? And if you don't, that's fine. But if you do, then we can partner with them and they can be as involved as they want to be. And that's really the key to it, because they'll know the inner workings of the company more than we will. They'll know what they've tried before and may not have been successful with. And then we can modify accordingly to ensure success. The other thing is to have internal champions. That's a really big piece of it, because everyone can say, everybody listen to Joel. Joel's going to move us through. We're going to do all this. But if you actually have those internal champions saying, I'm totally on board with what Joel's doing, I love it. And then from there, and that's really what we've done in every one of our engagements. We get those internal champions to be very excited about it. And then they start selling to everybody else. So when I talk about some of these big things we've done, like the migration to Teams phone or rolling out Envoy 3 MBTA, we did it on a department by department level. Every department has it's like their own little companies. Every department has their own little twerk, their own little things that they like to do, the little way they like to do it. And I, especially in a higher ed scenario, I learned that firsthand. A lot of the integrators that my stakeholders have worked with in the past will set up a war room. I've done it before, but you set up a war room and you're thinking, I'm just going to do this big switch. I'm going to flip a switch and we're going to be on this new system. It doesn't work that way. Everybody's got their own things going on. They've got their own initiatives internally. And then there's always the hiccups that occur, right? You put in a new floor online, but maybe that floor had some hiccups. But if you've got those internal champions, and that's what we did at every one of those steps, as I mentioned, we broke it into waves. At each one of those waves, whoever had just been part of that last successful wave or a couple of successes before was basically shouting to the organization, this is great. I'm so glad we did this. And then from there, we actually had people asking if they could be sooner. We had them out in like further waves in the timeline. They were like, I just talked to John. He said, it's great. It's been awesome for his organization. Can we get in sooner? And you don't get that with most projects. So definitely having the stakeholders and your people singing your praises is key.
I have to say, I find that fascinating, especially as you were saying, each department seemed to be their own little company. The operations manager in me just shrugged and thought, oh my goodness, this is going to be so much harder to do. But I love the way you looked at that and said, okay, that could be a challenge, but let's turn it into an advantage. It just really created an opportunity for you to say, all right, this is going to be a challenge because we have to do these chunked into smaller pieces, but let's use that as a proof of concept. And now we're creating lots of little coaches that can be our marketing pieces and that can help others know we're on the side of good. We're trying to do the right thing and it's working. And now they're laying the groundwork for you with others to make that next group in that next department even more excited about it. So I think that was brilliant.
And then the other piece is, and this was pre-COVID, I had envisioned, as I had done many times in the past, inviting all the different people that were going to be impacted, all the leaders, into a room, briefing them on what's going on, and then moving from there. And I was advised by people internally, they really did want to be treated as individual departments with their own say and this, that, and the other. So it added the time, it added extra in-person visits, but it did 100% make for a successful project because everyone felt like they were heard. And we took into account all the different pieces. And again, a case in point would be you're migrating phone lines from one system to another. There's a lot of phone lines that don't need to be there anymore, especially when you're going to VoIP. But we treated everyone like they were gold. We met with all the stakeholders who owned all the lines and stepped through piece by piece And if they said, I'm not sure what to do about that, we kept it. We could have just said, nope, sorry, timeline, we're flipping the switch. Let's see what happens. Let it ride. You don't have the best experience, the best possible outcome. You have an outcome, but it's not the best possible outcome. And we're really all about, and I'm really all about, and I used to lead with this, and I didn't this time, but I'm all about being a partner and not a vendor. And I think you can hear from all the things I've said on this podcast, I'm really all about making sure that we're a go-to partner. And that's really why I gravitated towards you. And I was so excited to join your team, is because it's really what we're all about. How can we be a partner to our clients so that we become the go-to? It's just a nice, casual, fun conversation. And I've had that in my past when I built a team of technical advisors for Mobiquity. I would just literally have lunch with one of my stakeholders, and you'd be like, "Oh, I was just in a meeting with the CIO, and he said when he was with the board meeting, sometimes people are remote. Do you know of any technology solutions that do X, Y, and Z?" Completely different than anything we were working on. That's what the partnership's all about, right? He shouldn't have to think beyond that. He should have a meeting, have a question, throw it out there, and get the answer that empowers him, because we want to make them successful. I don't need the credit. I just want to make sure that he's getting what he needs so that the credit he deserves.
There is a phrase, preaching to the choir, but you have just really emphasized exactly why we're so excited to work with you as well. All of the things you're talking about are exactly what we've wanting to build into MTMG. We're not going to try to sell you something. Our goal is to help you solve that problem, but we want to sit on your side of the table, and we want to be an extension of your team. And your attitude has always been exactly that. And so when we had the chance to work together again, I just thought, this is outstanding. And so you're just showing yet again why you're the right man for the task. Just outstanding stuff. But I know we're running a little long here for our typical podcast, but for the future, what do you see as the biggest emerging tech of today? And how do you think you can help current tech leader guide them through what the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years are going to be?
Oh, you just hit on my passion project that I've been working with companies on, and I absolutely love it. Of course, I'm going to say AI because everybody's saying AI, but the difference is, and I've now done 3 different webinars. The last one I just did was Secure Future Tech. It was a lot of fun because I showed the practical uses of AI. But I think that it's going to be how our businesses can transform using artificial intelligence. And it starts with looking at your actual business today, looking at your business processes, looking at how you do business and saying, okay, take a step back and say, and I'm still guilty of not doing it as much as I should. I just did a really great job of it yesterday. But before you do something, say, wait, how can I do this with AI, or how can AI help me here? Because you're the subject matter expert, and AI is a great intern or an assistant. And I think that's the way we're going to continue to evolve as long as we are in control. I joke about it. I've written on LinkedIn that I should start a company like puts the kill switches on all the robots. But as long as we're in control and we're the leaders, it's really where it's going to be. I'll give you a case in point. I just stumbled on my old newsletter, shindeep.com. They're not on the web anymore. I was going to try and find one because I remember writing about what I believe the future should be. I think it was in the late 90s that I wrote this, where I wouldn't have to code anymore. And any program I wanted, I could just speak in natural language and have that program come to be. And at the time, this from mobile infrastructure, at the time, the mobile infrastructure wouldn't support it. We'd be communicating. We could talk to the mobile phone, communicate it back to a server somewhere. But now we're getting to a point where it's powerful enough, it's fast enough, we're connected enough that this actually could really be a reality where and I think we've seen it early on now with ChatGPT where you're having a conversation with it, but there's some absolutely amazing solutions coming to market. One is called, I think it's Cursor AI. There was an example of an 8-year-old, like literally typing, I want to talk to Harry Potter and I want a blue box. And all of a sudden the code was generating and working. So you can imagine that's really cool for people who don't know how to code, but just imagine how amazing that is for people that actually are trained developers, and what's going to really end up happening with our future. And that's just on the coding side, business productivity side. certainly automation. We see it with learning and computer vision and the evolution of driverless, cars and all that. It's really like when people say AI, it's like the first thing they think these days is ChatGPT. It's been around a lot longer than the industry adoption. And similarly, we saw that with the web, right? There were people in higher ed that had web pages that they wrote in HTML many years before any of us ever anything on the web. And now we're just seeing the adoption of AI happening at such a frightening pace that I think that's going to be the big transformer. I'd love to see that VR is finally going to get the adoption that the killer app, the adoption that it's been waiting for. I love VR. I'm on my Meta Quest 3 daily. It's an absolutely phenomenal way of connecting people remotely. No joke, I play mini golf with my buddy Scott Kramer, who lives in Boca. We play daily, and you just catch up. You're talking through VR while playing. You feel like out playing golf. So I don't know. I sort of answered your question. I just went and geeked out big time, but
I love it though. I love that. So one thing I will say, as far as virtual reality, I've never been a big proponent of it because I don't see it becoming mainstream yet. I just don't think either the technology behind it is strong enough or there's enough of a consumer end app that really is going to make it a need, not a nice to have. But one thing that I think I'll introduce you to is that there's a company that we're working with that they are in the manufacturing industry and they have an augmented reality headset that the people can work with that gets down to, I think it's the sub-millimeter difference, but they can now see their blueprints through the VR and get incredibly detailed specs so they can build without having the need for the blueprints. And all of their work that's going on feeds back into a central server. So all the progress is reported on minute by minute, and that tracks against their project plans, and it tracks against their finance, and it tracks against all these things. That is the first time I've seen an incredibly useful in action VR that's been working. But that's a story for a whole separate podcast that we'll have to arrange with you.
Well, actually, I'll unpack that a little bit more. Okay. So what you're talking about is AR, which is fine. But
True.
But what blows my mind about AR, and I've been looking at the business applications of the AR since, I don't even know, 2010 or so. And I still can't believe it's not commonplace. So if I have a repair guy come to my house and he's looking at something, and I actually had a case in point was a few years back, the guy came out, my refrigerator wasn't staying cool. He came in, he's, one of your fans is broken, blah, blah, blah. He tested it, did all the usual stuff, ordered a new fan, comes back with a new fan. It's still not working. The new fan won't turn on. He can't figure out what's going on. And he's making phone calls to the manufacturer. Long story short, it turns out that even the replacement fan they sent was defective. So who would have known? I'm like, I don't believe it. That's not going to happen. I waited another couple of days. The new fan came. He was right. But at no point that would have been a perfect example of him literally holding his phone up, looking and tracing. Instead, he was pulling out some reference material. He called the manufacturer. And there's a whole bunch of those things still happening. I've had these conversations with guys that come to do the tune-up of the air conditioning or whatever the case is. And these days you could do your phone. There were, to what you're saying, there's been ones that have visors so that you go completely hands-free. We'll arc off a little bit, but AR, I think, is still, the killer app is there. For whatever reason, it hasn't been fully adopted. The technology's there. It's cheap. It's very cheap now. And it's very easy to make this a common thing. So it's definitely, and that's what they were trying to do with the Vision Pro, is they were saying there's so many use cases where you need your hands still. But if you had the ability to blur the line between physical and virtual, just imagine it. Maybe that's what it is. And maybe the Vision Pro is just too expensive for everybody to be excited about. And now the Meta Quest 3 that was VR has a lot of augmented reality or mixed reality associated with it now. So, and we're finally seeing. As far as VR goes, I will tell you, I think that Meta, which was then Facebook or Oculus, missed an opportunity. They had one of their big conferences was scheduled to happen and then COVID hit. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, they went all virtual. And I think they refunded people's tickets or something like that. But what they should have done instead is they still could have refunded tickets. They had plenty of money, but they should have sent everybody at the time an Oculus headset, because you can imagine how that would have just forced adoption. You've already got people who are passionate about it, excited about it. They wanted to go in person to the event. Why not just give them the device or give it a discount or something and just force the adoption? But I don't advise companies like that. Or
see, if they had just talked to you earlier, they would have been able to see that. But I completely agree with you. I think that would have been, you're right. They have plenty of deep pockets, and that would have been an incredibly good way to seed the market with people that would have been very eager to do it. And honestly, they would have been the perfect people to have put up with any challenges that came up with it. Oh, I have to reboot it. Oh, that's no big deal. It's just this thing that I really want to see work.
Exactly.
They would be perfect early adopters. Yep.
We all live and learn. They would just treat it like a reference design, right? It's a developer made, and it's a reference design. I'm okay with it. I know it's the redo. I'm good with that.
Yep. This has been an incredibly fascinating conversation. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being part of the team. But now is the time for the more than mere genius questions that we ask of everybody that joins. These are just to know a little bit more about Joel the person. Name a book or a podcast that has inspired you.
The book would be David Allen, Getting Things Done. I'm always trying to make myself as efficient as I can be. I think he does an absolutely incredible job of helping people understand how they can get more organized. My problem is I know what to do. I just haven't done it. I don't look around my house and be like, oh, why do I have all these, I'm looking around my house right now. Why do I have all these piles of things? And David Allen, if I just implemented my David Allen methodology, I would look and go, all right, what am I doing with these things right now? I'm going to touch it once, and I'm going to either delegate it or action it or something. Instead, I just piles of fun all around. And then the podcast that makes me laugh on a daily basis is Smartless. If you haven't listened to it, it's absolutely phenomenal. It's got Will Arnett, Jason Bateman, and Sean Hayes. And little did we know, they're all friends. When COVID hit, they created the podcast as a way to just keep themselves entertained, and they have incredibly famous connections. So the idea is that one of them is responsible for bringing in a guest each time, and they don't tell the others who that guest is. They have to figure out who the guest is as they're doing the intro. But it's dynamic. It's fun. It ended up becoming incredibly successful. You can look up how much money they sold the rights to, or licensed the rights, I should say, because I think the license came back again, and now it's on Sirius XM, but very entertaining podcast.
Fantastic. Who was an important mentor for you at any time in your life?
Unfortunately, he passed not too long ago. His name is Michael Walker, and I got to meet him. I was at GT. I was part of a reduction staff and was introduced to like a placement company that they had hired to help you find your next adventure. He was an ex-SVP of HR, had completely different perspectives on business than me. And I think that's why we hit it off and became fast friends. I looked at myself one way and he looked at me a totally different way. And I will miss him because of his unique perspectives and how he helped me look at things differently. And I think that's what we look for in a mentor, is someone that's going to help you help yourself in a way that you didn't think of.
Mm-hmm. That's a great one. Which talent that you do not have would you most like to?
So I have a little bit of it, but I wish I had a lot more. My mother is a piano and voice teacher. I was in vocal competitions and all that good stuff. So I feel like maybe I should have pursued that a little bit more. I don't know. I don't really see myself as a rock star. And I tickled the ivories, but I would never practice. So she stopped teaching me, and I regret not having gone a little further. And guitar is another one. Like I started self-teaching myself, but if I had more time, I would probably dive back into learning a little bit more piano and a little bit of guitar. Fun instruments.
Absolutely. As a struggling guitarist who taught myself, I taught myself a lot, but I know my roommate in college taught me an awful lot as well, but never took formal lessons. And it shows. I'm not really very good, but I'm good enough to pluck around and have a little fun. But anyways, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Actually, my wife and I always said that, and we're a little bit behind. We always said we wanted to be independent enough that we could work from anywhere. We always envisioned like a nice Caribbean island. I don't know if I would want to live there though. I think that's the challenge. I'd like to visit. I don't think I've visited anywhere long enough to know whether or not I'd want to actually live there.
Mm-hmm. Well, but that's still.
What about you,
the
Paul?
question, I am living the dream. I have a flat in Wales, a little house in rural Ireland, and then we live with family in the U.S. So I'm
That's
lucky as
fantastic.
anything, absolutely lucky as anything. And I'm in Wales right now, and I'm looking out my office window, and I've got 180-degree view of water. It is just a wonderful thing. So thank you for asking.
You'll have to send a picture. Yeah, we
will do
live in
that.
Rhode Island, and water. I do in East Greenwich, but then I'm also like 20 minutes away from the water in Narragansett, which is where everybody goes and it's a vacation. And there's something very therapeutic. So I guess I could revise my answer, but there's something very therapeutic about being on the water and it's feeling those like life moments. I try to go down there and what's known as walking the wall. There's this wall that's right on the beach that you can walk on Ocean Road in Narragansett. And all you do is see water. It's probably similar to what you're seeing right now. I'll send you a picture and you just melt away into that and go, what was that? What were we with?
I was talking to my wife about that this morning. Our granddaughter is here with us in Wales, and she's a little over 1. She has fallen in love with standing at the window and looking down the street that's right in front of us that goes towards the water. It's called Station Road, and she loves to stand there and just wave at people. Now, none of them
That's
wave
awesome.
back, but she
Right.
just loves it. She just thinks it's the greatest thing in the world. But yeah, that view is just wonderful. And the other thing is in Ula, we live right across the street from this little hill. And in rural Ireland, Ula is in rural Ireland. There's this little hill, and at the top of it, there's a statue of Mary. And I'm not religious, but there is something so amazingly calming. And looking over there as the sun is setting and they light up the statue of Mary, it is just beautiful at the top of the hill. And the funny bit is they also allow cows grazing on that land. So my wife has referred to it as the holy cows, but it is just, to your point before, it is just one of those places where you just sit and you look at it and it calms you down immensely. It really takes the blood pressure down a little bit. But again, what profession other than yours would you love to try? The Mike Rowe in you.
Yeah, exactly what I love to try. If I had the smarts and the dexterity, I would be a surgeon. That's pretty wild.
That'd be a big stretch, but I think if anybody can do it, you could.
I know I don't even know what he is these days. She was at Morse every day and now he's head of AI or head of surgery or cardiothoracic surgeon. That they joke every time we'd be scheduled to have a call. He'd be like, sorry I was late or sorry I couldn't make it. And I'm like, oh, so yes, I'm sure you were saving someone's life. I was just on hold. It's really not a big deal. I don't think my world really matters comparatively. I'm glad you were able to save someone's life. Thank you for making the time.
That's funny.
And as you know, it doesn't faze them. Like it's just them like saving lives or going back-to-back surgeries or diagnosing a patient and then performing the surgery is very like they treat it the same way I would treat a business challenge. And I'm like, okay, we're just built differently. I get it.
Mm-hmm. It is truly a calling. It really is a calling. And I don't think they're any more talented than you are, but I just think they have the ability to bring their talent out in that specific realm. And they're not afraid necessarily there's some significant risks with that. We talk about solving business challenges, and that to us is a lot of what we deal with every day. And it's very tough, and there's millions of dollars that may be at stake in any one of these things, but it's not life or death. And with a doctor, it's life or death. But who is your favorite superhero?
It's getting very real, very personal. It used to be Superman. I'd have to really think about this one now because I love the ability to fly. It's probably one of the coolest, not even the strengths.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What is your favorite sound?
It's a tie. One of them is the Tibetan singing balls.
Okay.
Those are pretty amazing. And then the other one is, I don't even know how you describe the thing you like twirl around and it goes like,
Okay. That is a first. I don't think we've heard that one before. So
it's a
what
cool
is your,
noise.
it is. What is your favorite song when you're stressed or you need a lift?
I seem to play Eagle Hotel California, seems to go to. And then I just forgot the name of it. Oh, I don't even know if this is the name of it, but it's I Can See Clearly Now. What's I Can See Clearly Now, the rain. That's the thing.
Are there specific versions of those? I'm really putting you on the spot. The reason I ask that is I love both of those songs, but very specific versions. So like the Eagles on their comeback tour that was live and pretty much acoustic, that one is the Hotel California that I think is just drop dead. I just think it's outstanding. You can hear a pin drop.
You'll have to send me a link.
Absolutely. And then as far as I Can See Clearly Now, there's a band, the Hot House Flowers, that did a cover of it that is just outstanding. So I'll have to share those with you as well.
I'm in. Yeah, send them up to me.
What is it that you would most like to be known for after you're gone?
I think it's my kindness and my ability to help other people solve their problems. Everybody always makes fun of me for this, but I always say, again, going back to like that tech guy who speaks to your man, I can save you a lot of time and pain. It's not a bother to me for you to just go, I have a question. Coming to me after and telling me about a problem you've had and how long it's for you to resolve it, that actually feeds me. I'd much rather get me telling the problem. Everyone makes fun of me because they'll say, and I try to avoid saying it now because I've been made fun of so much. I'll say, just give me a couple of paragraphs or give me a couple of bullets about what you need. Like, do you have any recommendations for a laptop? Oh, give me a couple of bullets, please. Give me something to go on. But nowadays I try to the whole reason they're coming to me is because they don't have those bullets. So now it's more a matter of I'm having this problem or that problem. So I try to be kind and I try to help them in the stuff that I take for granted, the stuff that I seem to know really well. Is this taking your challenge and solving it with technology? Just come to me. Let me save you hours and hours of pain. Call. I'll tell you right away if I can't help or I'll direct you. So I think it's being a go-to that way. And then hopefully being honest, being a kind person.
I definitely think you're a kind person. And I think you have
I set you up on that one.
You did. But I think you also have shown exactly why I'm thrilled to be working with you again. Your attitude and your philosophy so perfectly align with what we're doing at MTMG. And it's just talk to us about your problem. If I can't help you, I'll let you know and I'll try to point you in the right direction. I'll give you some help you refine your problem and maybe help you move it along a little further, even if we can't work together. But just talk to us about the problem. We've got a number of people that can help. And it's exactly what your philosophy has always been. So I'm thrilled to be working with you. I look forward to the next venture together with you and the next clients we can start helping. Thanks again for coming on board.
Thanks for having me. Fantastic.
So that brings us to the end of today's conversation. Thank you for joining us. If today's discussion resonated with you, please consider giving us a 5-star review. Your feedback not only supports our show, but also helps others find us. Thank you so much for listening to MTMG's IT Roundtable. We look forward to bringing you more conversations soon. Until then, take care and know our team is always here to help. Slán
MTMG, guidance that empowers.